All right. Well, what do you think? Should we get this party started?
Let's do it. Rock and roll.
Let's do this. Okay. All right. So, Chris, welcome.
Thanks, David. Great to be here.
Great,
Or
great,
here.
great to see you there, here, and in Etherware. All right. So, Chris, really honored to have you at our Explore lunch series, and of course, while most of us are having lunch, and I'm just having some water for the moment. You are in effect in the evening time. Are you not? I think you're 9 hours ahead of us in Zurich.
9 hours ahead, and I'm having a glass of wine, a little nice Bordeaux right now. So cheers.
Salud. Cheers, my friend.
To you and everybody else. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we're grateful for you being here. So, a little bit about this program.
Sure.
And I love this photograph because in times like this, we need to remember to laugh. Laughter is critically important. And here we have Seinfeld and Zach Galifianakis. Zach is a neighbor of ours. His family is in our school here in Venice, California. They're driving around in Venice. I think they're on Abbot Kinney right here. Stansbury, no, they're in Santa Monica. I can see the retailer back there. The concept of the Explore Lunch series was born from this show. And the idea, in effect, was I continued to have some of the most extraordinary conversations with innovators, with philosophers, with academics, with developers, with financiers, operators, policymakers, because that's what I do, and I'm privileged to have the opportunity to do the work that I do in engaging with clients in such a unique way. And the more conversations I had when I first joined Perkins and Will a little over a year and a half ago, it kind of dawned on me, Chris, I need to have these conversations be peddled, if you will, to a much bigger audience, to our staff, to my partners, my colleagues, and to our firm, because frankly, the content of these dialogues that I'm hearing was just so tremendous. So what we did was we actually it was all about dialogues about the world around us, right? That really is the concept of the Explore series. And so it was born in the LA studio. And let's see, here is I wish I could say it's a live photo, but here is where our Explore lunches have taken place thus far.
Nice.
So I see Nathan Matson sitting there. He's watching. I don't know what he's watching, but it doesn't look terribly interesting. There's Q having a cup of coffee, reading the paper, and Alice and Mark are in their point position. That is where they always are, in the kitchen, checking out Mark's laptop. They're doing something fantastic. So this is where we have hosted our Explore Lunch series before, and it's actually really been interesting. We've had 9 previous Explore lunches before. This is me interviewing Matt Howell from LPC West, so a private commercial mixed-use developer. Fascinating to hear about trends that he has seen and sort of where they're going in the industry and in the markets. This is Nico Rasconi, who is a leader in the hospitality realm, both in development and ownership and operations, and doing some really fascinating things in that space. Claire de Briere. Claire heads development for Skanska in Los Angeles, in that region. So it's pretty incredible what we've actually been able to do thus far. And Chris, I'm proud to say you are the 10th in our series. So,
all right, yeah, thank you.
A big round of applause. And
Number
I know
10,
everyone out there. I think we have like 50,000 people watching live right now. They're all clapping. I just want you to know.
Yeah.
So. So, I miss our LA studio a lot. I miss being there in person. Of course, I'm sitting here in our house, so I have to do whatever I need to do to sort of transport myself back into our lounge space and be with my partners and colleagues, and we do what we can. But I have to say, this time has also brought up some just extraordinary measures, and the most disastrous of times call for really the most needed products, right? We like what on earth would we do without toilet paper in a pandemic? So it's astonishing what's happening around us, Chris. And I know that you're experiencing all of these shifts and changes live as well. And so it's a fascinating time, and I look forward to kind of diving in a little bit more. So I actually want to start with you by actually, sorry. Forgive me. imperfection
right.
is also part of the new normal, and I'm granting some of
Good.
that. So what I want to say to all of our listeners and viewers, there is a Q&A dialogue box on Zoom. If you have any questions throughout this conversation, please use that Q&A space to ask your questions, and that can start now. And towards the end of our discussion, Chris and I will get to those questions and make sure that we have some time so that Chris can respond. So coming back to levity and humor, Chris, what is the funniest thing that you have experienced now being sheltered in place? What's the most random or humorous thing you've experienced thus far?
Well, there's a couple ways to answer that, David. First of all, sheltering in place I found to be quite difficult, both emotionally and intellectually. As you, I like engaging people. And so I've been in this apartment where I am right now since the 12th of March. And I found that it's really important for me to go take a walk, to walk myself every day with a shopping bag. And sometimes I end up filling the bag with something and sometimes I don't, but you're allowed to go shopping, and that's really good. I think the big aha for me was yesterday was my birthday, and
Happy birthday.
Thank you, I never thought that a Zoom video conference would bring me to tears.
Oh, that's
But
amazing.
it was really, and if you would have asked me a year or two ago if that would ever happen to you, I'd say there's no way. Come on, Zoom's kind of crazy. So it's like a Namjung Pike
That's
installation, right? But it was incredibly moving that people, my family from all over the States, all got on, made the time in their day in California and Ohio, and the East Coast to tune in, and
that's
how
amazing.
to me the importance of that was the importance of making time for each other when time all of a sudden has no meaning.
Yes.
All of us, when we're sheltering at home, we're actually almost on 24 hours. So and that was really, really a big aha for me. That was
amazing.
cool.
And if you think about the shifts in emotional intelligence, the EQ landscape that we have now is so different. So you're experiencing your birthday and the celebration. I've seen some photos of friends and family that we have around the nation, babies being born and meeting their grandparents for the first time with a window separating them. I'm wondering about weddings. I'm wondering about funerals. I mean, how are we celebrating these moments and milestones? It's a fascinating time. Well, that's lovely. Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're in your new place. Is that Zurich behind you there? Your backdrop?
This is actually Locks up in the mountains.
You're not far.
No, it's a blue sky. I'm trying to put blue sky up there,
blue
sky
good.
thinking.
That's good. All right. We have a lot of that here in Los Angeles. Okay. So Chris, let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, but here's the rule. It has to be from 2019 and before.
Okay. So born in Cincinnati, Ohio. My grandfather was an inventor. So for me, I always learned from him, nothing's ever good enough. You can always improve everything, which is a bad way to start through life, But my father, I learned, he went into business with my grandfather, and I learned from him that at some point, anything has to be good enough to go to the market. Nothing can be perfect. My grandfather always wanted perfect. My father just wanted something we could put on the market. So it's very interesting, and that kind of led me through doing civil engineering, and then I did architecture, and I became a bridge builder, really trying to bridge between the professions and education first, and joined Arup 20 years ago to lead the research and development team. At that point, 55 people who, as was described at one point, had brains the size of Jupiter. And they really were. They were just amazing individuals you never would ever want to put in front of a client, but you depended upon them to make all those promises that we make to you, or you made to us or to our clients together, real. And then I became an intrapreneur and created the Foresight team within Arup. And over the next ensuing 20 years, I then left leading Foresight research, innovation, ventures, essentially making sure that Arup was prepared for the next 25 years.
Yes.
That was what I did. And there's a lot of stuff in there, and anyone can Google me and find more than you should be able to find. So.
Well, and amazingly, I think yesterday marked your last day as a fellow at Arup, correct?
Yeah, this is true. Now
bravo.
I have left. I have up until 2019. I have now left Arup, and I've moved to Zurich to become to found a new unit. Sorry.
Yes.
Within the ETH, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, is where I did my PhD in architecture.
Okay.
And helping the president and the advisor and the school board, the executive board,
yeah,
with their strategy and foresight. Yeah.
Chris, tell us a little bit about ETH. So having lived in Europe, I know a little bit about it, but I'm hoping you can give us a little bit of background on the university.
So the university was founded at the end of the 19th century when Switzerland was going from a very poor nation with farmers and mercenaries to being developing a tourism industry. And as you know, the British created tourism for us here in Switzerland with the mountains, but all of a sudden they needed tunnels, roads, railroads, hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So a technical university was founded essentially to solve the grand challenges of the nation. And it is today the #1 technical university in Europe, one of the top 5 in the world, and has about 20,000 students. It is a Swiss national school, so any Swiss student who graduates from high school has the right to attend the university.
Wow.
Which is quite different from Stanford or MIT. We have to pay 65 grand for the
Sure.
privilege.
Sure.
And then you get to do that. And one of the things that they have here, which I'm very proud of, and is the thing called the National Competence Center for Research in Digital Fabrication, which is probably the world's leading research lab on digital fabrication in architecture that's around. And it's really, if you haven't looked them up, it's an institution you should look up. It's quite impressive, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a foremost leader in science, math, engineering, technology, and for you to be in the position that you're in there is of course nothing shy of extraordinary. But it's not surprising to see you go from the global role that you held at Arup, which is a firm I have the utmost respect for. Now to ETH is amazing. I'm so impressed and proud.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Yeah. So COVID-19 time.
Yeah.
Right. So that is something that is obvious, and it's on all of our minds. Have you noticed that 1 hour in your day in COVID time seems like an eternity? Have you experienced that? Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Have you noticed that 1 hour of COVID-19 time is an eternity in human years? There's sort of some sort of dog year interpolation there. What is that? What is it about receiving all this information and what that does in our minds?
You know, it's really interesting that I had a really, really hard time with the first week of being in lockdown. And I'm here by myself in a 2.5, 3 room apartment. And it was not easy for me, because I used to travel 2-3 weeks for Arup, 2-3 weeks a month, all over the world.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, you're locked in, you can't go out. And just for me, emotionally, it was very difficult. And I had actually a difficult time working. I became obsessed with learning about the difference between a virus and a bacteria. I'm sure as many on the call have learned what a virus does more than I ever knew I needed to know.
Right.
And trying to understand how it's being transmission, what different countries are doing,
right,
and what that meant and how we worked. The university went on a Thursday. It was decided we were going to lock down, and everything by Monday was online. So in 3 days, 1,300 classes went online.
It's extraordinary.
And it's very interesting to me. So week 2 became a little bit better as I started figuring out my rhythm. As you said, 1 hour but like one of my guys said, there's no weekend. You have no weekend.
No, you have no lunch, you have no breakfast, you have no dinner, you have no nights.
It becomes a continuum, and this continuum will probably last for us until the end of May.
Mm.
And it's really fascinating to understand. For us, we are in a very privileged position as a white collar worker.
Yes.
Because all those who are working on an hourly wage or at the base of the pyramid, trying to figure out how to just get by day to day.
It's a different scenario.
It's a completely different scenario. So that also, here in Switzerland, it's a very socialist democracy. So there's a very intense social responsibility feeling. And what has been incredible to me during this COVID time is to observe how different places are reacting.
Right.
And in Switzerland takes a long time to make a decision, but once a decision is made, then it's phenomenal how pragmatic and consequent then the actions occur.
So give us an example. You talked about the university going from in class to online with a snap of a finger. What's another example of what you've experienced?
So at the university, when the rector and the school board decided everything was going online, they said, okay, if we're going to do that, 1,300 classes, we need to have an army of people ready to start videoing.
Right.
So it wasn't like, okay, we're going to go online and you guys just figure it out. Go sort out your own shit. It's
right.
Like, we know we're expecting this of you, and therefore we're going to make resources available so you can execute what we expect.
Right.
And to me, that's a very interesting thing. So you make a decree, but then you have to support that decree. The second one was, we have a militia here. So every citizen is required to either go into to do military service or civil service.
Sure.
And there was 8,000 individuals were called up from the militia to support the civil society. And then there was another call for those who were in the militia but had medical training to volunteer to come back. And thousands just put their hands up and said, okay, if you're needed, we're here.
Right.
And that was quite impressive.
Yeah.
The other thing just one other thing, David, sorry. And the other thing I really liked is, we have our president rotates. They're not elected by the people, so it's a political position. It's a committee of 5, and the Bundesrat is called. And what I really appreciated, they were totally clear between what they knew, what they didn't know, and what they believed. And so they were very transparent about what they knew. They were transparent about what they didn't know, and they were transparent about what they believed. And they had, the scientists, the military, the doctors, the researchers, all at their back, making very clear decisions. And so you had confidence that this was not going to be fun, but it's what we needed to do now.
Right.
And so, I thought that was great.
Very interesting. I mean, that clarity is so critical right now. One of our partners in the Los Angeles studio, Jan Krimsky, we were talking about COVID time, and he said something that's been very profound for me, and how I think about it is whatever we are doing to respond, either as a firm of Perkins and Will, as an industry within the built environment realm, we need to ensure that in an already very loud environment, we are not adding to the noise. And so it goes back to those layers of clarity, and the more intense the problem is, almost equally important the simpler the messaging of solution is. To some respects. So
I totally agree with you, David.
It's quite interesting, and to look around at governments and businesses, country by country, continent by continent, and see what's happening is fascinating.
I think the other part is compassion. To understand, as I said, this lockdown thing that we're experiencing is it's a white collar thing. So to understanding with compassion, like for us, we created a fund within the Office of the President to support those who were working an hourly wage in the lunchroom, because all of a
Right.
sudden, from Thursday to Monday, they had no work.
Right.
And they depend on that hourly wage, and it came up like, well, what about them? And so this is this idea of compassion that you have to. The beautiful word in German is solidarity.
Mm.
It doesn't have the same meaning in English. It doesn't sound quite the same. But to have solidarity as a citizen, in a way, it's a citizenship test.
Right.
Yeah. To understand, what is your understanding of what it means to be a citizen?
Right.
And to me, that's really at the heart of many of our actions and reactions, is kind of redefining citizenship.
Yes.
As a global citizen, as a citizen of a city, as a citizen of a community, of a company, how do we define that? And what does it mean for you to receive and you to give?
Right.
As a citizen,
I love that.
All of this, yeah.
I love that. So compassion and empathy and humility and how we engage with our neighbors around us. A brief sort of housekeeping conversation for those that are participating here. Those that are new to Zoom, this is a webinar. So you are watching. We will be engaging you in about 20 minutes or so in a dialogue. But if you do have any questions as they come up, please fill up the Q&A dialogue. So Chris, back to the content and the discussion. I know that you have been so curious about what is happening with COVID that you actually took the initiative to create a very thoughtful questionnaire. I had the opportunity to fill it out over the weekend, and I must say it was the most cathartic moment that I've had over the weekend.
Great. Thank you.
Was engaging with this. So I'm curious, what have you seen? I'm sure you've gotten many responses, and what is it revealed to you?
Well, thanks for asking, David. What to me is a big part of my job and my role is to help us together think about the context of the world to come. Because as designers, we're not designing yesterday, we're designing tomorrow. None of us are trying to design the hospital of 1950. Although there's some aspects of those hospitals which are pretty kick-ass, but we're trying to design the future, right? So therefore we have to understand what that future might be, where the world is that we're going to walk into when those doors open. So the questionnaire for me was like, okay, we're in this moment of crisis. And we have, lots of us have time to think. And even if even as my questionnaire revealed, I come back to it, said for some people, they said nothing has changed. I had already been online for the past decade, so
right.
This is no big deal. And for others, they said, I had one person responded and said, well, I have 3 more days until I lose my job.
Right.
And everything's going to change. And I don't know where it's going to go.
Right.
And so we have these kind of 2 extremes in a way, nothing and everything. But the questionnaire for me was, they're asking what's changing for you personally, what's changing for you professionally, what do you think our society should learn from this? What does it make you think or hope for when we're looking to the future about our planet, about our society, about your profession? And
yes.
I think this is for me, the questionnaire, which is, I was thinking about these myself. And I know that there are far more smarter people outside of my little apartment than inside it. So I wanted to kind of get gather this collective insight. And I really, it was also interesting. I just wrote down like 5 things that people said. And I have about 100 responses, and I know I would welcome more by the end of this week. Then I'm going to kind of close it and then talk about them. But
yeah, we will send that questionnaire out
cool,
after.
Thank you so much.
What were the highlights? What have you heard?
Well, one of the thing that really the biggest change for them personally was just no contact with anybody. That was a really big one. It really struck me because I resonate with that. And that another one that said all contact is tempered with fear.
Mm.
You know, to imagine, and I know this is sort of, when I go for a walk in the afternoon, the duck and weave that I do to avoid coming within 6 feet.
Right.
And so
Whereas normally as a human, you look to support your neighbors and engage with your community, and now we're avoiding.
You look them in the eye. Now it's sort of like, I'm not going to look at you because maybe it's just so weird. You know, that's really a thing. Another one said, this is a test run for the big one. And this came from an epidemiologist, actually, from the WHO.
So this is only the beginning of the series of pandemics.
Yeah, and that was just like that. That hurt my stomach when I read that. I was just
you opened another Bordeaux.
Yeah, no, that would need a good whiskey, actually. If I think for that one.
There you go.
Another one said, you know, I've seen a really beautiful acceleration and willingness to engage and challenge. This is from someone who is deeply engaged with trying to help. And I thought that was really beautiful. That this is a big professionally. And another one said, and I'll end with this one. Well, I got two more. One was, he just sent me a note today, actually. It says, my teenager, I had to call the ambulance today because my teenager had a panic attack. That was so severe, we didn't know what to do.
Right.
And I just thought to myself, wow, you know, these kids who are so used to their freedom, they're being able to go walk around and have a panic attack,
right?
And, like uncontrollable as a parent, that it's so bad that you call an ambulance. And as I have two children, and for me, I mean that just hurts when I think that I would be in a place when I would need to call the ambulance because I don't know what to do.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that was something. And then the last one was a colleague said to this, we're the ventilator and the intubation issues were like the arms race of 2020. Because every nation seems to be on a ventilator arms race.
Right.
Who's going to come up with the quickest one? And I have to say, I'm really pleased to say that at ETH, they're focused on making and working with the South, the global South, to create the ventilator for the South, because we don't need to create one for Switzerland.
Right.
You know, or Germany or France, or even for America. But
right, relatively speaking to other third world environments.
The place at the base is going to be horrific is the base of the pyramid. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
We're just starting it.
Yeah. So
those are the things that came from the questionnaires.
Amazing. I mean, what will you do with this data? How will you bicycle it?
So I'm going to take them all and take a look at each question at a time, and then I'm going to actually put them together into like a summary. And I've offered in the questionnaire those who would like to have like a webinar like you're leading now, to host a webinar for like the top 5 questions.
Amazing.
Just take one question at a time and then share what we've heard. And then as you're doing here, take questions and
yeah, sure. Oh, that's
maybe publish it, you know, who knows.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do push that out. Okay. So Chris, about three months ago or so when the world, or maybe now 4, if I think sort of around the holidays, when this really started coming out, in China. Before that, you were heavily engaged and focused and conversing about planetary boundaries. And I've always wanted to have the equivalent of an Explore lunch dialogue with you about planetary boundaries. That could take up an entire series of another 10 Explore lunches. But I'm curious if you can kind of summarize your obsession about planetary boundaries.
Sure. Very happy to, because I became obsessed with this when I met and spoke with Johan Rockström in New York during Climate Week about 2 or 3 years ago. And this is a concept which has already came out in 2008, 2009, which is essentially saying Earth has a planetary bank account of the natural resources which we depend upon as humans to exist on our beautiful planet. And that bank account is being withdrawn without being replenished. And the withdrawal is happening at a rate which is really unacceptable. And there's some who say, well, this is sort of this COVID-19 is Mother Nature's way of trying to reduce the planetary virus which humanity is in its consumption of our resources. But the more important for me is, as designers, we have an obligation and an opportunity through understanding the planetary boundaries to make sure that everything that we're doing is respecting those boundaries. And that is not only climate change with emissions, but taking a look at ocean acidification or plastics. And how do we live within that bank account? And what can we be doing to make sure that we can look our grandchildren, if we have grandchildren or nephews or the next two generations, look them straight in the eye and say, I did everything I could to ensure that your world was as beautiful as my world. And I don't think as a profession we can do that right now.
Right.
Right. And so for me, there's two parts to it. One is, what are some of the science-based targets that we need to understand? What's science telling us? And then what can we design towards? Those are the two sides to it. And
sure.
I think there's no one who sits there, there's no one of us, I'm sure, on this call who says, I want to destroy the planet.
Right.
No one. But by so many of our very actions, the way we design, the way we build, the way we live, we do. And again, it's an unintentional consequence, and we can no longer claim ignorance.
Yes.
And so I'm sort of become obsessed with how can we really flip that switch. It's like taking the Architecture 2030 and putting it on steroids. And so that's.
So how does the obsession, which in a way I see, I respect it. It's been an obsession on the one hand. On the other hand, it seems like it's our citizen duty, and certainly in our firm that is paramount. And I know in Arup that is paramount, and amongst many firms around the world who are in the built environment. How do you see planetary boundaries now in the last 3 weeks, given our recent crisis that we're faced with?
Great question, really great question. And I'm sure you've seen the pictures, as many of the air quality improving of Boston, New York, Beijing, Hong Kong,
Los Angeles,
LA. So for me, what was really interesting is to see how quick Mother Nature brought back the equilibrium which she searches. Right? And and I don't wear Birkenstocks, and I don't wear wool jumpers, as they say in Britain. I'm not an way off left wing guy, and I lots of respect, but it's not me. But when I look at that, I go, okay, here's a moment where there are some lessons which we should be taking. We should be observing and saying, okay, do we have to go back to where we were? Right? And this comes to the planetary boundaries and Corbett saying, let's take a deep breath. Our planet is taking a deep breath right now.
Right.
She's breathing deeply, like she hasn't been able to breathe in 25 years.
The only thing that doesn't need a respirator right now is our planet. Right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So she's taking a deep breath, and so should we. And so we should really take a look and say, what is it that we want to get back to? Right? Because this is going to pass. We're going to, a couple 100,000 Americans will die. We're going to probably, 1 million people around the world are going to die. It's not the last pandemic. And we know that flights are going to get back going. We're going to see these contrails like this one all over the place again. We're going to get back in airplanes and run to our clients, but or will we? And that to me is the moment here where we have to truly think about our practice. and say, okay, what is it that I really need to do face to face?
Right.
When I have to expend the carbon, expend my life energy or whatever, going someplace. And I used to travel 2 to 3 weeks a month.
Sure. All over the world.
And that's what I decided. This is one of the reasons I took this role. After 20 years, I decided that was enough.
Right.
And I haven't gone on a plane since, I tell you, I took a train to Berlin. I could have flown an hour and a half. It took me 8 hours up by train.
Sure.
Right. But this is the consequence.
Yeah.
That we have to actually be consequent in our decisions, that to really truly follow them and say, okay, if I believe in this, then these are the actions I have to then take.
Sure.
And it's not just a matter of planting trees in some other country. Right.
Right. So do you see, like so many of us, I certainly am an optimist in my soul. Do you see this moment as it relates to planetary boundaries as a positive moment of reset, an opportunity for us to completely relook and rethink about what living design is in our society and in our built environment?
I hope so, David. I hope so. I think you'd have to ask how many webinars have you had about that topic, or how many are scheduled, to know whether or not it's actually going to make a difference.
Yeah, well, it's certainly, I know within our firm, as an example, we are there are many different sort of channels or paths of action that are occurring. There is the sort of immediate response. What can we do proactively today to help be good stewards in the built environment? If that's providing additional patient beds or fabricating parts for ventilators and masks, et cetera, et cetera. But there are also those who are acting as thought leaders, which is a really beautiful thing, thinking about what will, as this curve flattens and we come to the other side, and what will that look like, and how can we be more responsive? And hopefully that aims more towards a more fruitful environment.
So what I would say, David, what I would wish for you, Perkins was a great firm, and I say that not just as a former Arab colleague, but with great respect. And you should be thinking about what it is that you would like to be saying after COVID.
Right.
Right. I mean, I respect and really, truly what you're working on right now, and the response. This is a crisis. We all have to work on that, yes. And at the same time, it's like, when you're really busy, it's exactly the time you've got to be looking for your next job.
100%. That's the environment that we're in. You're absolutely right.
Now, so what is it that we really do want to stand for, focus on after COVID? And what does this mean for us? What are the lessons that we are taking with us about society, about our community, and our role as designers?
Right. Well, I think it's really astute advice, and I think it's something that you said we are the privileged as white collar workers. I feel that way. I feel like our it's almost it's privilege or almost duty. It's our responsibility. We have the freedom and capability to be responsive and be proactive. So now is our time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to jump back to the rest of the group here and just ask you. We've gotten a handful of questions in, which we will start to address here in a few minutes. But I just want to make sure that folks, if you're going to ask questions, you do it right now, because what we're going to do is actually talk a little bit about community and how we engage with communities within these new social constructs. So go ahead and ask more questions, but I'll vamp on this for a second, Chris, and then I'd love for your input. Community and social constructs. I believe that in the not so distant future, we may not be shaking hands anymore. we may not be answering phones anymore. We may be engaging in social avoidance rather than social come-togetherness. And so these social constructs, how will that affect our community? And before you answer that, what's beautiful about a Zoom meeting is that we can see our community. So we have a lot of people on right now. What I'd like to do is actually ask Chriselle, who is co-hosting right now, why don't you move people in? And what's going to happen is you're going to move in to be a panelist so you can have videos, much like Chris and I, just like a normal Zoom meeting. What I'd ask you to do is keep your microphone muted, but share your video. We want to see this community as Chris talks a little bit about communities, and then we will finish with some Q&A. So as you come in, feel free to turn on your video and mute, and we'll go from there. Looking forward to seeing all of you. So Chris, what do you think about this? How do we look at social constructs and the new realm of our communities in the future?
It's a really great question, David. Well, I was being very rude and multitasking, reading some of the Q&A questions, which are really quite excellent. So I'm looking forward to getting to some of those. Okay, so
yes.
So for me, you know, it is the question of the day, and I think how we understand who our community is a big question.
Right.
Because, you know, we're tribal animals as Homo sapiens, which is one of the things, my isolation in this space, these 2.5 rooms, has even brought out to me more as how social in the sense of communal, this idea of being able to walk down the street and see other people is really important to me. You know?
Right.
And I also put my hand up and say, I am a bit of an extrovert, and there are many introverts for whom this is not as challenging as it is for me as an extrovert. And with respect, you know, it's all right, because it takes all types. But so I think we've got this through the social media, this social medium, not social media, the social medium
right.
needs to be really thought about. And is there a way in which you, as Perkins and Will, have tools and new tool sets which you're going to need to be utilizing in order to engage your communities in which you're working with.
Right.
And it makes me think of last time I was in Brisbane, they had a really, really great method for doing community engagement for planning.
Right.
And it was fascinating because the planners hated it. Right? Because they said, we're the planners, we're the professionals, they're the citizens, we know what we're doing, they just have opinions.
Right.
And it was so interesting to actually see what was coming out of this kind of engagement with the citizens, this unbridled opinionism, and so that good and bad, you can take your pick.
Right, of course.
But I thought that was really impressive. So
yeah,
that's not really a good answer to your question, but it is the question of the day, dude. You know, how do we engage our communities and how we define them?
Well, it is.
It is the question of the day, and I can't give you a great answer to that. Sorry.
Well, I feel like it's our privilege that here we are as a society in the built environment. We are architects, we are planners, we are engineers, we are designers, we are innovators, and all of these realms coming together will help kind of redesign what these social constructs in our community really are. So in a way, I see it as an incredibly opportunistic time in the most positive way to innovate and move forward and how we engage as a community. So let's see, we have 3 weeks ago, my wife and daughter got back from Paris. We pulled them out right when the Italian border closed, and they came back with a really cool Swatch watch for me. So I wear it with pride, and I love it.
There you go.
My new clock on my wrist. So we have 15 minutes, Chris. What I'd love to do, we have a handful of questions here. I believe a former associate, perhaps, but a friend of yours, Eric Brasi de Dios. Rather than reading, Eric, your first question regarding 20 years ago, I'm going to unmute you, Eric, and I'd love for you to go ahead and ask Chris, and please feel free to engage. Maybe you can unmute. There you go.
How you doing, Eric?
Good. How are you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Great. Yeah, it's great that you're back at the ETH.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, I left my Q&A.
You asked about the former world 20 years ago without smartphones and technology, but is it a happy accident or fortunate timing, I think is where you were going.
Right. And is there anything we can draw from that looking forward as well?
Yeah. So it's quite fascinating to look at. I'm sure many of you, as I have, I hope all of you haven't not been obsessed with learning about pandemics and epidemics over history and their impacts. But if we look at the impact of COVID compared to all the other pandemics so far, it's just a tiny little goldfish in a huge pond of the pandemics. So if you go back to the Spanish flu and the bubonic plague, when 20, 30 million people were killed or died, it's a very interesting. It's interesting to see how human evolution and development, our civilization, is dependent upon the conquering of death due to viruses and death due to bacteria. So through sanitation and understanding, we were able then to conquer early death. So at the time of the bubonic plague, you were old if you were 29 years old. And it was not long ago that the average age was 65. Now it's 70 something. So if you look at, and there was the technology of each time made us a sprung, a jump, as a response to those plagues. But it was also nature's way of culling the herd, and kind of creating a balance between the consumption and the provision. And so it's very interesting to look at how, and there's a couple articles, like Yuval wrote a really nice piece that I think everyone should read, really thinking about the implications of this, about how, in a way, because we've done such a great job of keeping us alive, almost ad infinitum, that Mother Nature's had to come up with another way to try to cull the herd. And it's a bit brutal to say that way, but this is Mother Nature trying to find a planetary balance, pulling us back within our bank account. This again, the planetary boundaries. How do we live within the boundaries that we're not using more than we should be? And so this is going to become interesting. So the question that for me I take from your thing there, Eric, is what technologies are going to leapfrog because of this? And there was a question a little bit further in there, something around monitoring. And will we end up in a purely 100% monitored state for our own good? Where you have to take your temperature with your phone twice a day, or you're tracked to make sure that if you're infected, we know exactly who you've also infected. Now, every single one of us on this call is already tracked. Our governments, both the American and the Swiss governments, track us. They have access to know exactly where we've been, who we've interacted with. This is already there. It's simply a matter of what they do with that information and who it's made available to, and is an open marketplace or not. And so will that become even more common? And will we give that up? Or will our bodily functions become part of the public information which is gathered? And that does concern me a lot. And To what degree would you, if you knew that it was going to keep your parents alive, would you give up your privacy?
Right.
That's just, that's like, oh man, don't ask me that question, really.
Well, that conversation of privacy is
It's a long one.
brave new world stuff right there. Okay, I want to move to another question.
Sure.
This is from Yubi Han. Yubi, you can unmute and maybe say hello to Chris. It's nice to see all of us in our community now. Yubi's question was that it is easy to focus on the negative current and future impact of COVID-19, but of challenges come innovation and progress. We talked a little bit about that, but he asks, what benefits or beneficial adaptations do you foresee, Chris?
So I would kind of turn around to Yubi and say, what do you imagine could be, some of the domains? That's sort of a leading question. I suspect you have some ideas already.
Well, hi, nice to meet you, by the way.
Hi, good to see you.
I think there's definitely a great lot of negatives to this that we can all focus on. What's the economy going to be like? What are and these are questions that people ask, but I've started wondering, just even this kind of atmosphere of meeting people more so in a digital setting. We always talk about digital infrastructure, and do we really need to have an office space, right? Do we need to always be in a room together to get work done? There's always conversations also of things that we're kind of forced to do. I'm sure maybe we're all using more applications where food is delivered to you, groceries are delivered to you, and things of that nature where maybe you weren't so prone to utilizing these technologies, yet we're forced to now, and we're realizing, hey, you know what, it's actually not so bad, and it's actually beneficial. And so then what does that mean as far as how we grow from that and adapt to the new normal? So that's kind of what I was coming from.
So I think that's a great question, Yubi. I think, because there's always a yin and a yang in everything. And I think that's actually really, really good, because as we're seeing these horrific images of individuals dying, and to me, one of the most heartbreaking images I've seen in the past 2 weeks is the chapel in, I think it was Cremona in northern Italy, with dozens of caskets. Because in Italy, family is extremely important, and it's important to many, many, many cultures. But in Italy, for an elder to die by themselves, is just like, how could that happen? So this is like one of the most horrific things. But on the other side of that, then, is saying, well, perhaps out of that, we will then appreciate even more the moments when we have that human interaction. And we'll think more carefully about what the meeting is about. So, to me, this is what I'm hoping. I call myself a pragmatic optimist now. And I attended so many meetings in Europe where I just sat there and I wondered, what the hell am I doing here? I'm here because so my name was on the protocol that I was in this room. But what the F is, this is like 2 hours of my life I will never get back. and so to me, it's like, okay, maybe this gives me a better opportunity to say, I don't need to be there, or whoever's calling the meeting will think twice about whether that really has to happen physically. So I can dial in digitally, so I can be on the protocol, but I can still do everything I need to do, right? So this is what I think could be a positive outcome, so that we'll understand what we need to do in person, and what we can do virtually. So I think that's one thing. The second is, I think this is an incredible opportunity for us as a profession to show about the importance of place and the design of place, right? So where we gather, how we meander, what it means to be in a place together rather than by yourself, or to have places where you can be alone and together, right? And I always love about an English pub. Anybody can go into an English pub by themselves, and it's okay, right? Which is you can be in there by yourself, but you're still there, right? Which is, I think we kind of have to have somehow think, how can we really engage this in this more? And then the last one is that, as you pointed out already, Yubi, we have to reconsider our utilization of space in a big way. And I think this is both an opportunity and a threat to us. And in the sense of we've collectively, our two firms have made a lot of money on designing offices. And I think a lot of those offices, after this rapid digital transformation, are going to be thought about perhaps differently.
Might see a little bit of change, maybe just a smidge, right? Just a smidge.
I think that's actually a good thing.
It's a very good thing. It's a very good thing.
So that we can really think about what kind of spaces do we really need to have,
and how do we engage, and what is necessary for that engagement.
Exactly.
I want to move us to another question, Chris. We have Paul Mills from Fort Collins, Colorado, and his Paul, if you can unmute yourself, his question I think is going back to your commentary about the responsibilities we have as a civilization. What do you think the number one priority as a civilization we should be thinking about as we emerge from this changing event? No pressure. You have a minute and a half to answer that. Do you need another Bordeaux?
This Bordeaux that I'm drinking is way too young for that question. Okay, so my short answer to that one, Paul, and it's a really intense question, and I would love to have all 50 of you who are still on the call to actually answer that question, because this is what we all have to think about in our hearts. You know, is what should our priority be? You know, this is like in my questionnaire. The last question is, when this is over and our businesses open their doors, what should be the first thing that we do? You know, this is what you hope to do. So I think what I would like the number one priority to be that we commit to determining a new economic model which does not depend upon depletion. And because our current economic model depends upon depletion of resources, depletion of, it's a depleting model. It's not a circular model or regenerative model. And so if we could come out of this saying, okay, and by that is, how can we be regenerative of ourselves, of our communities, of our environment, of our world? So it's just, how can we, that would be, and I say that because the pragmatist in me says, if we don't have an economic model, all the idealist in me will just be vapor.
Right.
And that's I would like, it's like, I would love to be, was it Julia Roberts who just said world peace or something like that? Whoever said world peace?
It really, you could have just said that, and I bet Paul would have felt very fulfilled.
Yeah, sorry, Paul, but I think we've got to figure out the economic model. And I really don't like that answer, but it's the hard question. And until we sorted that one, I think I'm afraid my idealism is going to still be in my shirt pocket and not in my pen.
Okay, so I hate to be the one to bring this to closure, because unlike COVID-19 time that can run its own course, those of us that are existing on normal human time have looked up and realized that it's time to move on. Chris,
what time is it?
It is 10 p.m. your time. It is.
Whoa, it is.
It is time for a slumber. But what I would like to do, Chris, what we always do at the end of an Explore lunch, we will share some lessons learned. We will. If you don't mind, I'd like to distribute your email address to this group.
Yeah, please.
Because there were additional questions I know people would love to ask you directly. I just want, for those who are still on as well, Chriselle and I will send out Chris's survey, and it is a fascinating series of dialogues that I think is very cathartic and very thoughtful as we think about what the post-COVID realm is. So, Chris, thank you a million times over, David, for being our 10th Explore guest. And if everyone could kind of give us a clap, I want to see a community of clappers. Thank you, Chris. We are grateful for you. Keep doing what you do, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Well, thank you, David, and thank all of you for tuning in and for your choice to be with us today on this topic. And I wish you all the very, very best.
Thanks so much, Chris.
And stay socially distant, physically distant, but not socially distant.
There you go.
That's my thing.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Thanks so much, Chris.
Take care,
and stay tuned for the next Explore lunch information. Goodbye, all. Pleasure to see you.
You're so welcome. Take care, guys. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.